Nietzsche's lightning flash insights versus slow thought. Friedrich Nietzsche famously favored the flash of sudden insight over plodding systematic analysis. He likened great thoughts to lightning bolts, brief, blazing illuminations, rather than the painstaking glow of a scholar's lamp. In his view, truth is often grasped in swift, intuitive moments of clarity, not by methodically assembling arguments piece by piece. This philosophy of rapid insight is evident throughout Nietzsche's works. He wrote in aphorisms, pithy, standalone paragraphs, precisely to capture ideas unfalteringly formed in an instant, rather than drawn-out treatises. Nietzsche's style and content both celebrate intellectual brevity and scorn overly academic, slow-paced contemplation. This analysis explores Nietzsche's lightning strike approach to thinking through key passages in The Gay Science, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and Beyond Good and Evil. We'll also uncover rare insights into his contempt for pedantic scholarship, connect his approach to similar ideas in other thinkers, from Heraclitus to modern cognitive science, and consider applications and critiques of thinking like lightning today. Rather than building a slow, linear argument, he fires off ideas as self-contained epiphanies. In Beyond Good and Evil, BGE, Nietzsche opens by mocking the heavy seriousness of past philosophers. He imagines truth as a woman who had been wooed ineptly by clumsy, dogmatic thinkers. These philosophers approach truth with terrible seriousness and clumsy importunity, laborious methods and pompous systems, which are unseemly methods for winning a woman. In other words, truth eludes those who come plodding and over-earnest. Nietzsche implies a successful lover of truth would be more agile, witty, and quick, seducing truth with lightness and grace rather than beating it to death with analysis. In The Gay Science, 1882, Nietzsche's aphorisms likewise often celebrate spontaneity and creative boldness. For example, he asserts, "Live dangerously," an injunction that applies as much to thinking as to living. The free spirits of whom Nietzsche speaks are intellectually adventurous. They leap over the tedious rules of academic philosophy. Nietzsche even added a preface to the 1887 edition, boasting that the aphorism, the concise sentence or paragraph, is the literary form of eternity for him, able to outlast bulky systems. In a later work, he unabashedly declares, "It is my ambition to say in 10 sentences what everyone else says in a whole book, what everyone else does not say in a whole book." Nietzsche believed that if you truly have something original to say, you won't need 800 pages to say it. A few explosive lines will do. Zarathustra's thunderbolts, sudden realizations in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche's masterwork. Thus Spoke Zarathustra is saturated with imagery of lightning, fire, and sudden illumination to describe acts of thinking and creation. Zarathustra, the prophetic protagonist, praises the mind that moves with the speed and ferocity of a storm. One famous exclamation equates the coming of the Übermensch, Overman, Superman, with a bolt of lightning. "Behold, I teach you the Übermensch. He is this lightning, he is this madness. I am a prophet of the lightning." Here the Übermensch, Nietzsche's symbol of humanity transcending itself, is compared to a sudden flash of blinding brilliance that splits the dark sky. Zarathustra's teaching itself is delivered in an oracular, lightning-like style, bold declarations, paradoxes, and vivid symbols meant to strike the listener's soul immediately. Nietzsche deliberately avoids step-by-step logical exposition. He wants the reader to experience philosophy as a jolt. Zarathustra also contrasts his own rapid, passionate mode of insight with the slow plodding of scholars and the pious. In the chapter On the Scholars, Zarathustra reveals his impatience with academia and methodical thinkers. He describes leaving the house of the scholars because his thoughts came too hot and wild for that dusty, cautious environment. I am too hot and scorched with my own thought. Then I have to go into the open air. But they, the scholars, sit coolly in the cool shade. They want to be mere spectators in everything. This vivid image juxtaposes Nietzsche's fiery, urgent insights with the scholar's cold, shadowy detachment. Zarathustra likens pedantic scholars to millstones grinding grain into fine dust, over-analyzing lively ideas until they are powder. They work like mills and like pestles. Just throw seed corn to them. They know how to grind corn small and make white dust out of it. In other words, academic thinkers take some vibrant kernel of truth and grind it slowly into sterile, white dust with their analyses. Nietzsche's Zarathustra would rather seize the whole grain and bake nourishment from it, i.e., get a big, nourishing insight, whereas scholars pulverize it into flavorless flour in the name of thoroughness. Instead, Zarathustra champions the value of immediate, vigorous vision. He says our thoughts should not hide timidly like shy deer in the woods, but go forth to conquer and possess like warrior's wisdom itself, Nietzsche insists, prefers a bold warrior to a timid academic. In another part of Zarathustra he writes, brave, unconcerned, mocking, violent, thus wisdom wants us. She is a woman and loves only a warrior. Wisdom, personified as a woman again, loves courage and audacity in thinking, not patience and caution. Finally, Nietzsche even trusts the body and instincts more than slow intellectual rationality. Zarathustra flatly states, there is more wisdom in your body than in your deepest philosophy. This remarkable claim exalts the wordless intuition of the body, the gut feeling, the sudden hunch, the visceral insight, above abstract reasoning. Our deepest philosophy, the product of long conscious thought, is still inferior to the innate wisdom that can arise spontaneously from our physical being. Nietzsche here anticipates modern ideas that our unconscious or embodied mind often solves problems and perceives truths faster than our conscious analysis. It's another facet of his lightning flash philosophy. Trust the sudden insight, the instinctive realization that bubbles up fully formed over the laborious deductions of pure logic. Intellectual brevity versus scholarly pedantry. Nietzsche's critique. Nietzsche didn't just prefer rapid insights for himself. He openly criticized the academic mindset that prized slow, comprehensive analysis. He saw excessive analysis as a kind of cowardice and life denial, a retreat from the vitality of thinking. In Zarathustra's On the Scholars, as we saw, he portrays scholars as dusty, cautious creatures who watch life from the sidelines. They mistrust any idea that hasn't been chopped into tiny, palatable pieces. Nietzsche uses biting satire. Scholars raise a dust like flour sacks when grabbed, yet no one can guess that dust came from living corn. The suggestion is that scholars themselves forget the living truth that originally inspired their analyses. All that remains is fine dust and an empty cloud of jargon. He also notes scholars know how to play with loaded dice and prepare their poisons carefully. A dig at how academics engage in petty intellectual tricks or overly cautious criticisms that sap the vigor of ideas. Throughout his career, Nietzsche extolled brevity, directness, and even silence over verbose scholarly discourse. He bragged about his aphoristic style and condensed prose, as quoted earlier, aiming to compress books into paragraphs. In Twilight of the Idols, he even suggests that what others don't say in whole books, he can express in a few lines. This wasn't mere stylistic preference. It was rooted in a philosophical conviction that truth emerges in flashes. Drawing out the process only waters it down. As he puts it in Ecce Homo, his intellectual autobiography, one hears but one does not seek. One takes, one does not ask who gives. A thought flashes up like lightning. It comes of necessity and unfalteringly formed. Here Nietzsche describes how his best ideas, specifically the idea of Zarathustra itself, came to him in an involuntary flash, complete and perfect in form, rather than through careful searching. He almost portrays himself as a conduit for insights that arrive fully formed, like lightning out of a dark cloud. This quasi-mystical account underscores his belief that genuine thinking happens in leaps. Prolonged, methodical thinking often merely elaborates or distorts the initial insight. Nietzsche's disdain for academia was personal too. He himself had been a philology professor, but he abandoned academia in part because he felt it stifled genuine insight. He lampoons learned professors in multiple works. For instance, in Zarathustra, Zarathustra jokes that the scholars crack knowledge as one cracks nuts and hoard dry facts, but he prefers the open air and freedom to think dangerous thoughts. This resonates with his statement in The Gay Science that, "Our academies of scholars, I shudder to think what they really are," paraphrasing his sentiment about the stale state of scholarship. Nietzsche wanted philosophy to energize and transform life, not become an ossified academic game. He considered excessive analysis a symptom of decayed intellectual vitality, a preference for safety and rigor mortis over risk and creation. To Nietzsche, then, intellectual brevity was a virtue. Packing maximal meaning into minimal form keeps thought closer to its initial spark. The longer one explains and argues, the more the raw spark dissipates. He admired, for example, the pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus, who composed his philosophy in cryptic aphorisms that force a sudden leap of understanding. Nietzsche felt warmer and better in Heraclitus's company than anywhere else. Tellingly, one of Heraclitus's fragments is "lightning steers all things." This ancient Greek idea that a lightning flash of logos, reason, governs the world resonated with Nietzsche's love of the sudden and powerful. Like Heraclitus, Nietzsche wanted to strike with brief truths. Parallels in other philosophers and thinkers. Nietzsche was not entirely alone in championing intuition and brevity. We can draw lines between his lightning philosophy and several other thinkers. Heraclitus, 6th CE BC. As noted, Heraclitus wrote in short, enigmatic sentences and believed in the ever-living fire of reality. His style required the reader to grasp the meaning in a flash. Nietzsche admired this. The Heraclitean idea that lightning steers all things is a lovely parallel to Nietzsche's view of insight. The guiding truths of the world might come as lightning bolts, not as static formulas. Nietzsche's emphasis on flux, chaos, and creative strife also echoes Heraclitus's worldview of constant change. Both saw struggle and sudden change as fundamental. Nietzsche's sudden insights are the intellectual equivalent of Heraclitus's sudden cosmic shifts. Søren Kierkegaard, 19th C. Kierkegaard, like Nietzsche, was a harsh critic of Hegelian system building and overly abstract scholarship. He valued the subjective, passionate leap of faith understanding. Kierkegaard once quipped that systematic philosophers are like a man who builds an enormous castle and lives in a shack close by. They do not live in their own huge systematic buildings. A man's thought must be the building he lives in, otherwise everything is topsy-turvy. This is remarkably close to Nietzsche's critique. A philosophy that is all on paper and not lived, not seized in a gut way, is worthless. Kierkegaard favored the immediacy of existence over detached analysis. He often stressed that truth is experienced in an instant of decision or commitment, not derived logically. Both he and Nietzsche rebelled against the dry intellectualism of their time, especially against the all-encompassing castles of Hegel's slow logic. While Kierkegaard was religious and Nietzsche atheist, both share a respect for the power of the moment over the system. We might say Kierkegaard's leap of faith is a kind of lightning strike in the spiritual realm, a sudden commitment without rational proof. Arthur Schopenhauer, Nietzsche's former idol Schopenhauer, had a complex view of intuition and reason. He did write long-winded volumes, but he also argued that genius is marked by intuitive vision. Schopenhauer distinguished talent, which hits a target no one else can hit, from genius, which hits a target no one else can see. In other words, genius involves seeing something in a flash that ordinary minds cannot even fathom. He believed that in art and philosophy, geniuses grasp the Platonic ideas through immediate intuition, not step-by-step reasoning. Nietzsche inherited some of this esteem for the intuitive aha moment. However, Nietzsche diverged by tying intuition to life affirmation and will to power, whereas Schopenhauer saw it as a way to escape the will. Nonetheless, both would agree that the deepest understanding isn't a plodding logical process. It's more like a sudden seeing. This independent streak and trust in one's inner vision connect Schopenhauer with Nietzsche's stance. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Though not mentioned in the question, it's worth noting Nietzsche loved Emerson. Emerson's essays are full of epigrammatic insights. He urged people to trust their spontaneous impressions. In every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. Emerson believed in intuition, primary wisdom, and warned against humankind's tendency to overly deliberate. Nietzsche took inspiration from Emerson's style of delivering wisdom in shimmering, concise remarks. Modern cognitive science. Intriguingly, 21st century psychology has concepts that mirror Nietzsche's intuition versus analysis distinction. In Thinking, Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman describes System 1 thinking as fast, instinctive and emotional, and System 2 as slower, more deliberative and logical. Nietzsche's lightning flash insights align with what we now call System 1, the brain's rapid automatic mode. His distrust of over-intellectualizing aligns with recognizing the limits of System 2 when overused. Cognitive scientists have found that intuition can often solve problems or make judgments more efficiently, drawing on unconscious pattern recognition, whereas conscious reasoning is slower and sometimes prone to overthinking. Nietzsche intuited this over a century ago by privileging the wisdom of the body and sudden intuition. Furthermore, creativity research distinguishes between insight problem-solving and analytical problem-solving. Insights often come as sudden eureka moments when a person is not consciously grinding away at a problem. A flash of connection forms in the mind. Neuroscience has shown that moments of insight, aha moments, are preceded by a broad, diffused mental state and often an incubation period where the unconscious mind works unawares. Then the solution bursts into consciousness, seemingly out of nowhere. Nietzsche's own account of inspiration in Ecce Homo, the idea flashes up like lightning spontaneously, could be describing such an insight phenomenon. Modern research confirms that while an insight feels instantaneous, it often is the culmination of unseen mental processing. Nietzsche might say, "Fine, but the point is, you don't get there by forcing it stepwise. You get there by allowing the mind the freedom to leap." Today's creativity experts likewise encourage techniques like brainstorming, free writing, or stepping away from a problem to invite sudden insights, rather than doggedly pursuing one line of thought. All this science serves to bolster Nietzsche's intuition that lightning thoughts have a legitimate cognitive basis. They are not mere laziness, they're a different mode of cognition. Henry Bergson. Shortly after Nietzsche, Bergson championed immediate experience, intuition, over analytic intellect in understanding reality. Bergson argued that the analytical mind breaks time into frozen pieces, but true understanding of life, durée, comes from an all-at-once intuition. 6. This is philosophically akin to Nietzsche's preference for grasping wholes and dynamics in a flash, instead of analyzing static parts. Both were reacting against mechanistic Enlightenment rationalism. These parallels show a recurring theme in philosophy, a reaction against overly rationalist, systematic thinking in favor of direct, lived, or intuitive insights. Nietzsche's lightning metaphor and aphoristic style put him in a lineage of thinkers valuing quality of thought over quantity of words. Even in Eastern philosophy, we see something similar in Zen Buddhism's emphasis on sudden enlightenment, satori, as opposed to gradual study, an interesting cross-cultural analogue to Nietzsche's idea of sudden realization. Though Nietzsche wasn't directly influenced by Zen, the comparison is illustrative of a common insight about human cognition. Applying Nietzsche's approach to modern creative work. What lessons can we draw from Nietzsche's philosophy of rapid insight for our own intellectual and creative pursuits today? Several key practical applications emerge. Trust your intuitions with care. Nietzsche would encourage thinkers and creators to value those sudden ideas and gut feelings that arise before you have a full, rational explanation. Often, your mind or body intuits something true or important well before your analytical brain can articulate it. In modern work, this means in brainstorming sessions or artistic inspiration, don't immediately dismiss an idea because it seems crazy or because you haven't reasoned it out. That lightning flash could contain a genius insight. 1. For example, entrepreneurs often talk about light bulb moments where a business idea crystallizes in an instant. According to Nietzsche, one should seize such moments of clarity and run with them rather than over-analyzing until the inspiration dies. Use aphorisms and brevity as a tool. Nietzsche's method of writing in aphorisms can be adapted as a creative technique. Try to condense your thoughts or project concepts into pithy statements or sketches. In fields like design or writing, this might mean formulating the core concept in a single sentence or tagline first, the lightning strike, before fleshing out details. By formulating an idea in a brief form, you capture the essence without drowning it in minutiae. This can clarify thinking and communication. Modern presentations, like TED Talks or pitching an idea, also value concise, punchy delivery, a very Nietzschean impulse. As Nietzsche said, the aphorism, the sentence, are the forms of eternity. A powerful one-liner is remembered long after a verbose treatise is forgotten. One might, for instance, distill a complex research finding into a vivid analogy or slogan to truly convey its meaning, much as Nietzsche did with God is Dead to encapsulate a whole socio-cultural thesis in one thunderclap. Embrace creative chaos. Nietzsche famously wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." This speaks to the idea that a fertile chaos of ideas and passions is the precursor to creative insight. In practice, allowing your mind to wander, exposing yourself to diverse experiences, and even courting a bit of intellectual madness can set the stage for lightning strikes of inspiration. In modern terms, this might mean stepping outside your discipline for inspiration, mixing art and science, or brainstorming freely without immediate criticism. Nietzsche's approach encourages a kind of intellectual playfulness and risk-taking. Many innovative companies today encourage a culture of experimentation and quick prototyping, fail fast, which aligns with valuing quick insight and learning rather than planning every move in detail. The lightning approach in creativity means take bold leaps. You can always iterate or correct course later, but the leap is what propels you beyond the status quo. Short bursts of work. Instead of grinding for hours in analysis, consider working in intense, focused sprints followed by breaks, a pattern which often produces more insights. 4. Nietzsche himself took long walks in nature, letting his thoughts roam until a flash of insight struck, at which point he would jot down a burst of aphorisms. 4. Modern productivity research suggests that the brain's creative mode benefits from alternating focus and rest. When grappling with a tough intellectual problem or a creative block, it can help to step away and do something unrelated. Take a walk, as Nietzsche did. Often the answer will pop into your head when you're not forcing it. Sudden realization after a period of incubation. 4. This is effectively harnessing the lightning strike mechanism. Many writers and inventors attest to breakthroughs coming in a flash during a shower or a drive, not when staring anxiously at the problem. Communicate boldly. Nietzsche's style teaches us to communicate ideas in a bold, memorable way if we want them to have impact. In modern intellectual work, whether giving a talk, writing an essay, or pitching a project, there is power in speaking in striking images or striking formulations. 5. A metaphor or a shocking, concise statement can jolt an audience into understanding the core point instantly. 5. While you need substance behind it, crafting that lightning sentence that captures your insight can make all the difference. 5. Think of how Nietzsche's own phrases, will to power, slave morality, eternal recurrence, are like intellectual sound bites that carry decades of thought, yet provoke immediate reflection. In summary, applying Nietzsche's approach doesn't mean shunning analysis entirely. We'll address balance in a moment, but it means giving intuition and brevity their due. Encourage those aha moments, capture them without dilution, and use them to drive your work forward. In a world flooded with information and lengthy reports, a Nietzschean lightning bolt idea can cut through the noise and reveal a new path. Critiques and balancing insight with depth. Is there a downside to Nietzsche's love of lightning insights? Critics have often pointed out potential pitfalls in this approach. Risk of superficiality. The most common concern is that an idea gained in a flash might lack the rigor or evidence that comes from slow, methodical analysis. A lightning insight could be a brilliant leap, or it could be plain wrong. Without careful examination, one might run with a flashy idea that doesn't hold up. Nietzsche himself, by forsaking systematic argument, opens himself to charges of inconsistency or misunderstanding. Some readers find his aphoristic works bewildering or self-contradictory because he does not spell out connections. A quick insight, if not examined, can lead to superficial understanding or an idea whose nuances are missed. Nietzsche's aphorisms require the reader to do some work in filling the gaps. Not everyone will catch the fullness of the insight, thus misinterpretations abound. For example, Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, or the declaration, God is dead, have been widely misinterpreted, partly because of their provocative, concise expression. Detractors say, if Nietzsche had elaborated more carefully, perhaps fewer people would twist his meaning. In short, the lightning flash can blind as well as illuminate. It might give only a partial view. A purely aphoristic philosophy might miss how ideas interrelate in a larger whole. Indeed, one critique of Nietzsche is that his unsystematic style leaves ambiguities about how his ideas hang together. Did Nietzsche's lightning insights build a coherent philosophy or just brilliant fragments? Some scholars have spent careers trying to systematize Nietzsche's thought after the fact, teasing out an underlying structure he never wrote explicitly. This suggests that while the insights are powerful, one eventually must weave them into a consistent framework or risk superficiality. A lightning bolt alone is momentarily bright, but sustained light, some system, helps navigate more reliably. Nietzsche might retort that life itself isn't systematic, so why should thought be? But the tension remains. Misinterpretation and elitism. Another issue is that Nietzsche's style can be difficult, even elitist. He writes for readers with sharp eyes who can follow his leaps. Not everyone can or will unpack a dense aphorism. As Nietzsche said in Zarathustra, "Thus they muffled the sound of my steps, and so far I have been least heard by the most learned." He knew many scholars simply wouldn't hear him because he refused to speak in their slow, plodding language. The danger is that quick insights communicated obliquely might only reach a few or be misunderstood by many. In Nietzsche's own case, we saw how a lack of systematic explanation enabled distortions of his work. Most infamously, his Nazi-affiliated sister misinterpreted and cherry-picked his lightning bolt phrases to suit an ideology he'd have hated. This shows that leaving ideas at the aphorism stage can be a double-edged sword. They are open to multiple readings. A slow, careful exposition might prevent certain misuses. Of course, nothing can prevent all misuse. Even systematic philosophers are misread, but aphoristic ones give extra free rein to readers. Integration with analysis. Today's cognitive science would add that while System 1, fast thinking, is powerful, it also has biases and blind spots. Snap judgments can be wrong. Think of cognitive biases that lead us astray. The ideal is to have a dialogue between fast and slow thinking. Nietzsche's approach might undervalue the complementary role of slow, critical reflection in refining and double-checking the insights that intuition provides. A modern thinker can take Nietzsche's lesson to generate bold ideas quickly, but then use analytical thinking to test or elaborate them. For instance, a scientist might get a hypothesis via sudden inspiration, but still must rigorously experiment, slow work, to verify it. A writer might pen an aphorism in a flash, but then rewrite and polish it. Nietzsche sometimes did revisit and refine earlier ideas. His own thinking evolved, but his published works seldom show the working. We see mostly the final flash. The risk for followers of his method is to become enamored of the flash itself and neglect follow-through. Balancing act. The best approach may be a balance, something Nietzsche's philosophy implicitly allows even if his style tilts extreme. Nietzsche provides the antidote to over-systematizing. He reminds us that without the initial creative spark, all the analysis in the world is just wheel spinning. He brings back the value of vision, intuition, and boldness to a culture, then and now, that can get overly obsessed with data and method. As one scholar of creativity put it, insight solutions are often more elegant and innovative than analytical ones, but the two can work together. So, a practical thinker can let Nietzsche's lightning inspire the generation of ideas and use of concise expression, while also employing slower tools to scrutinize and implement those ideas. Nietzsche himself, despite his anti-academic pose, was extremely well-read and could be quite methodical in his notebooks. The published lightning strikes are backed by a deep well of knowledge and reflection. This suggests that preparation and groundwork are important. Nietzsche's flashes didn't come from nowhere. They came from years of grappling with philosophy, art, history. The appearance of effortlessness can be deceiving. For us, that means we should cultivate our minds through study, observation, etc., so that when insights come, they have substance. It's like preparing the field so that when lightning strikes, it hits something fertile. Another point of critique is that some truths are complex and do require sustained analysis to understand fully. Not everything yields to a one-liner. Nietzsche might agree. His own work hints at complexities, e.g., the concept of eternal recurrence. He presents as a thought experiment in Zarathustra is intentionally challenging and not easily summarized. His lightning method is perhaps best for values, perspectives, and psychological observations, things that can be evoked in metaphor and sudden shifts. But for detailed empirical matters or ethical policy, one may need to slow down and reason stepwise. Nietzsche's approach could seem to dismiss that kind of careful reasoning as inferior. A balanced view would say each mode has its domain. In defense of Nietzsche, one could argue that starting with rapid insight doesn't preclude detailed follow-up. It just ensures the detailed work is guided by a genuine vision. The superficiality critique assumes one stops at the insight. Nietzsche's own insights were starting points that he often revisited across works. For example, the idea of will to power appears in many aphorisms, each shedding new light. So he was, in a non-linear way, building a mosaic of thought. It wasn't a linear system, but it wasn't random scatter either. Appreciating Nietzsche requires seeing the connections between flashes. Thus, while there is a risk of superficial reading, a careful reader can discern depth and development in Nietzsche's body of aphorisms. Does Nietzsche's lightning philosophy hold up? Many would say it offers a much-needed reminder of the power of intuition and the living moment in intellectual work. Yet it should be complemented with critical thinking. Nietzsche might respond to critiques with a chuckle, noting that his mode of thought produced strikingly original ideas that we're still debating today, whereas much of the plodding scholarship of his era is long forgotten. Therein lies a final lesson. A brilliant insight, communicated in a memorable way, has far more cultural longevity than a cautious academic treatise. Nietzsche bet on intellectual boldness over caution, and in many ways, he was vindicated by the impact of his ideas. Conclusion: scouting lightning in thought. Nietzsche's philosophy of the lightning flash celebrates the thrilling immediacy of insight and the ability of a brief, passionate thought to cut deeper than a volume of analysis. We've seen how, in The Gay Science, Zarathustra, and Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche consistently urges a mode of thinking that is quick, bold, and alive, like lightning striking in the dark, illuminating truth in a brilliant flash. He practiced what he preached through aphorisms that deliver their payload in seconds and metaphors that jolt the mind. He also warned that slow, pedantic contemplation can smother the spark of truth, turning warm ideas cold and sterile. For modern thinkers, Nietzsche's approach is both inspiring and challenging. It inspires us to seek the vitality in our thinking, to find those aha moments and trust them, to compress our insights into potent forms, and to never lose the fire in pursuit of truth. At the same time, the challenge is to avoid the potential pitfalls of superficiality by integrating insight with understanding. In a sense, we might take Nietzsche's own advice: become who you are. If one's nature is a lightning flash thinker, then embrace that gift and use it to burn new paths in thought, but also ensure your thunder, the rumbling after work, gives it resonance. In the realm of creation and innovation, Nietzsche's lightning philosophy reminds us that progress often comes from daring intellectual leaps, from those willing to shout, "Eureka!" and break the old molds. And even in everyday intellectual life, we can benefit from occasionally stepping back from the grind of analysis and waiting for the sky to light up with a new idea. When it does, grasp it, as Nietzsche did, and perhaps scribble your own aphorism or two. In a world that sometimes overvalues sheer volume of information, Nietzsche teaches the merit of precision, passion, and brevity. After all, as he provocatively claimed, a thought, even a possibility, can shatter and transform us. We need those shattering, lightning thoughts to push culture and knowledge forward. In Nietzsche's own fighting words, philosophy always creates the world in its own image. It cannot do otherwise. If we philosophize like lightning, who knows what bright new images, what new worlds we might create in a stroke.